Everybody, thank you very much for coming tonight. Tonight we have Religion is Bullshit versus Smokey Saint on Is There Sufficient Reason to Believe the Christian God Exists? So, we know there's been a bit of bad blood between them. They've had a few interactions before, but hopefully tonight we'll have some fun. So we'll roll the intro and we'll get started. And that's the wrong fucking intro. There we go. Wonderful live production in the pigsty as always. So, right, everybody, we have Smokey, we have Rib, we have a topic. Smokey, I will let you go on ahead first if you want to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and where to find you.
Sure, absolutely. I assume you put my link in the description below?
No, I forgot to put both of them.
Of course not. Okay, well, good enough. I'm actually pretty easy to find. If you type in Smokey Saint at the top in YouTube, I come up usually right up at the top. So you can find me. We host open nights. We take challenges to the Christian worldview, try to answer difficult questions, delve into philosophy, history, culture, theology, all the things that seem to be more meaningful in the pursuit of modern belief systems. So, and we are open to hearing what other people think and exploring ideas. So if you guys are interested, please come by the channel at some point and we'll have a conversation.
Dave is posting your link in the live chat as we speak for everybody watching tonight.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for that.
Yes, and while you are having your opening statements, I'll update the description and throw it in. So, Rib, who are you?
Well, I am a very argumentative atheist. I'm very opinionated, and it's very hard to change my mind on things. I'm sure anybody who's ever dealt with me before will know and attest to that. Smokey, maybe you will. Unfortunately, unlike yourself, I don't have the luxury of coming up first in the YouTube searches because it's a fucking George Carlin bit. Other than that, if you search like Rib Podcasts,
Did you think about stealing the clip and just uploading it on your channel?
I mean, I thought about reacting to it maybe, but anyway.
I cheated. I just became 10 channels. MathPig 1, MathPig 2, MathPig 3, MathPig 4. There's 10 of us, and then one of the people in the community stole my icons, and there's actually a MathPig 11.
We're stealing his thunder.
So basically, if you type in Rib Debates in the top of YouTube, you will genuinely find me. I host a podcast, I host a call-in show, I do debates. Anywhere where there's an argument to be had, basically, is where you're going to find me. So with that, I'll kind of kick it over.
When do you do your podcast, Rib? When is that usually done?
When I'm free, and right now I'm literally, and I don't have like the set time.
Like anyone can come and talk to you and stuff. Do you upload that on your channel or no?
The kind of general conversations, no, I don't tend to upload those. They mainly take place on Discord. But
okay, got it. Okay, just curious.
Okay, right, shush. My channel now, fucking Smokey, you bossy bastard.
Hey man, you're just failing at hosting.
Right, well, what we've done is we've got here tonight to have this debate on the topic, is there sufficient reason to believe the Christian God exists? The format is in the description. We're going to go with opening statements. We're going to let Smokey go first, then Rib, then Smokey's going to go with a rebuttal, and vice versa. We will have a 45-minute to an hour back and forth where we will take turns at leading the conversation, and then at the end we will have 15 minutes for questions. If you want to ask questions as it goes along, if you could, please leave context if it's early before the questions and answers so we have a fucking idea what you're talking about. And tag Dave or tag Santi. They're my little helpers tonight, and they will keep a track of the questions. So other than that, I think we'll just dive straight into it. So Smokey, I will move across to my little timer, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, actually, sincerest thanks for MathPig for setting this up, and to Rib for showing up and doing this. I really do appreciate it, and it's a fun topic. I actually love the topic of this debate, so much so that it's actually tragic. This is the first time I'm showing up to debate it as it has been worded here. Sincerest thanks to MathPig for setting up. Rib willing to face off with me a fourth time in a debate. And I'm certainly sending kudos to both for bringing an interesting topic to the conversation for us to engage in. I very much look forward to this exchange and promise to attempt to be on my best behavior. Ultimately, facing off with Rib multiple times now, I think I have a better feeling for him. In the past, I have been harsh, if not downright brutal, to him both in public conversation and private exchanges, but have taken time to reflect on our interactions, and I want to give appropriate credit to Rib. Yes, he has an air of vitriol about him towards theistic belief systems, as it is even inside the acronym that makes up his online image. To Rib, the pursuit of the elimination of belief of a deity is a virtuous pursuit. And while I would classify this as evil personally, I can at least at this point give him the credit of his humanity, that ultimately his heart is empathetic and, while misplaced in my opinion, is seeking what he has defined as quote-unquote good. Since I do believe this, I'm going to give him credit I wouldn't have done in previous debates and take this to the personal epistemological level and use an apologetic I not only tend to avoid using, but have publicly shown distaste for. The keen-eyed and sophisticated members of the audience will recognize it without me needing to give it a name, so I won't do so. But this will also be good for the audience to see what I believe is to be an appropriate usage. So let's tackle the topic head on. The key component of the question posed to us this evening revolves around the operative idea of sufficiency for belief. Who is it who decides what is sufficient for a belief to an individual? Who is entitled to make the decision for another person what is sufficient for one to believe? At the end of the day, this is ultimately a purely subjective question that can only be answered by the individual who is digesting the evidence. One could even argue that to arbitrarily decide for another party what is sufficient to believe could be immoral, a violation of free will, free speech, and freedom of belief. These are things that a majority of the Western world has agreed are civil virtues worth respecting. Yet, it seems that modern atheism seems to be an activist mission of shame. The beliefs that vary from the atheist community are prone to all manner of mockery and ridicule so as to discredit and shame those that would dare claim to have sufficient evidence to believe in a deity. This method of operational tactics is more than hypocritical. It is an attempt to assert a standard of sufficiency, of epistemology, of belief on the masses that is shared only by a rather vocal social minority. Many modern atheists seem very comfortable not only asserting their standard of evidence on others, but also shaming them and labeling them as irrational when they don't adhere. As is typical to atheism as a theme, the ends always justify the means. Well, we can only decide what is sufficient for belief for each of us, and for many of us, an a priori or axiomatic acceptance of the existence of God is even plenty to start from and infer the nature of the universe both to and from the source. Each of us have to operate off of either circular reasoning or axioms at the base of our reasoning. The denial of solipsistic perspectives means that we are operating with the axiom that we can trust our sensory perceptions to govern reality. Every single one of us is entitled to equal respect, that we all can only operate from unsubstantiated axioms that we all just accept. We all accept that we can use logic because we wouldn't be able to have this conversation without it. We don't need to exhaustively justify the existence of an accepted axiom of reality. It is something that we all just accept as we interact with each other. We accept the axiom that we are real free-thinking creatures interacting with other free-will creatures without needing to have a rational or thorough justification for this. Ultimately, at the base level of all of our personal epistemology lies either circular reasoning or axiomatic justifications. Every person engages in this without the worry of being labeled as irrational, yet it seems to be the atheists who call us irrational for taking our axiomatic acceptance just one step further, by attempting to attribute a meaningfulness in the order of the universe that seemingly should not exist in a non-determinate universe in which we live. Our axiom is just as valid and should be considered just as rational as what any atheist can provide, as we simply take what they provide as an axiomatic justification for their worldview, and we draw an inferential line to a logical termination where God is the source. To attempt to judge this as irrational is actually to undermine your own worldview and ability to challenge ours, as your attempt to invalidate our inferential axiom gives every reason to discount your own that you are using to critique ours. In my opinion, this is indeed sticky territory for an atheist, But I am excited to see how this conversation unfolds. And with that, I yield.
Perfect. I just stopped the timer. And that was just about 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes or so. So I will reset that back to the start.
I'm used to the tag team debates at this point. I don't know how to do the long ones.
Well,
I concede any time Rib needs.
As we discussed at the start, we did say in the description up to 15 minutes, and we discussed before we went live. Any time that's left over, we will then shift and add it on to the back and forth. So that's another extra guts of 10 minutes added to the back and forth for Smokey. So, Rib, I will pass over to you.
I want to do the same. Thank you to everybody for...
You're very quiet, Rib.
I just wanted to do the same. Thank you for everybody for coming through. For Smokey to being here. Am I okay now? Am I better?
Wee bit louder would be great.
Sound good to me. Yeah.
Sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So same. All that. So, is there sufficient reason to believe that the Christian God exists? No, because if it was, I wouldn't be here. Or if I was here, then I would be arguing against somebody who thinks like me that there is not sufficient reason to believe that God exists. If I could kind of do something like prophesize, shall we say, what types of arguments are going to be coming up? It's probably going to be what my standard or definitions of evidence are. So I'll go over those or as quickly as I can. My audio is still low?
Yeah, it's very low, man. We have a couple of people mentioning, in the chat
as
well.
Any better?
There you go.
It's really, really high.
There you go. That's you. You're good.
Right. Okay, I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, don't touch it.
Okay, so the types of evidences, right? So evidence is proportionate to the claims that are making, right? So each and every single claim has a burden of proof, has a set standard of evidence that needs to go with it in order to demonstrate that claim truthful or positive. And each and every claim has a separate standard of evidence that goes with it. So just for example, Smokey, I'll use you for this. If you were to tell me, Smokey, that you have a pet dog, right? I know that people generally have pets and that a dog is an extremely common pet to have. So I'm willing to take you at your word alone with no evidence at all that you have a pet dog. If I wanted to, of course, however, and under the correct conditions, I could, again, under the correct conditions, go to your house, check if there's a dog house, if there's, a dog door, are there dog turds in the yard. I could go into your house, check if there's dog food, dog treats, dog lead, any of these things, without actually seeing the dog. All of these things are pieces of evidence that are leading towards the truth of the claim that you have a pet dog. Now, obviously, that's just one example, and that's a very, common example, etc., etc. One of my best friends of I don't even know how many years now is in the audience watching this. I trust him with my life. He's anyway. He's an extremely trustworthy person. There would be almost virtually nothing that he would say to me that I wouldn't at least have an element of belief going towards that. However, if he was to phone me in the morning and say, Stephen, I was abducted by aliens last night, taken to a foreign planet, impregnated, and then flown back to Earth and dropped off here, am I going to believe him? There is no way in hell am I going to believe that. There's going to be a substantial amount of evidence going towards that. So whether you label this as empiricism or whether you label this as just having a high standard, whatever you want to do, I'm perfectly fine with. The issue and the main point here is that when you are talking about quite probably the most substantial, the most important claim that there is this origin from which the breath of life comes, that created everything. He is an immaterial, non-matter mind that is outside of time and space, that created every single thing and cares who I stick my pee-pee in. These are that's an unbelievable claim that you need an unbelievable amount of evidence for. And things like faith and look at the trees and look at the stars and how did we get here and all of this, and oh, well, science doesn't know yet. Well, science knows it doesn't know, otherwise it'd stop. But just simply because science doesn't know doesn't mean that you get to shove your God in there like an ill-fitting jigsaw puzzle piece, because everybody is going to know that the piece doesn't fit, right? They're going to call you out for it. So that's pretty much all that I had planned. Most of that was off the cuff anyway, so I hope I did okay. With that, I'll kind of leave it over to Smokey for his rebuttal.
How dare you not take more time than me? All right. Okay. It's all good. No, that was okay. I appreciate that, Rib. Thank you. Go ahead and let me know, Math Pig, whenever you're ready. Okay. Well, I just want to make sure you have the timer ready to go. I probably don't need the full 5 minutes because it's pretty short and sweet on some of this. So yeah, whenever you're ready, I'll go. Okay, perfect. So what I heard was kind of, I guess, more of the taking the stance of the claim of the standard of evidence of what would be viable for a person to accept, and basically leveraging the idea, which I agree with, that the nature of a claim will kind of alter the standard of evidence that an individual will prioritize or think is sufficient. And I'll give a different example other than the dog analogy, which, by the way, I would agree. If someone says they own a dog, I think that's even the type of claim that can be accepted a priori without any substantial or extra justification. I don't think you need to see a dog bowl or a dog mat or any of that stuff to accept the claim that someone has a dog. So, because that's an extraordinarily common normative claim for someone to make. And, generally you wouldn't expect someone to be deceptive about something like that. So you don't even have an ulterior motive that you could attribute to that. So it's a very base level claim, but let me give an anecdote of my own, which is kind of the unicorn in the kitchen. And this goes along the lines of, just follow me here, is that you claim to your friend that you have a unicorn in the kitchen. Now, your friend, believing that you would never lie to them, may accept that without any substantive evidence, and because maybe they're a mystic and they just have a worldview that accepts it, it's going to be real easy to convince them. Someone else slightly more skeptical may need to actually see it, which they'll look for the unicorn in the kitchen and you'll show it to them, and that'll be enough for them. And even though they're skeptical, it'll be enough to convince them. That'll be their arbitrary standard to accept it. Someone else will need to actually have DNA tests to see that it's not actually a member of the horse family, or check to make sure that someone didn't actually just super glue a horn on top of a horse's head or something of the like. Another person might need to actually ride it through the air while it craps out a rainbow until it finds the pot of gold on the other side. Each person can basically arbitrarily set their own standard of evidence, but only each individual can actually set whether or not that standard of evidence is sufficient for them. To make the claim to the contrary, you need to be making a claim that actually aligns with whatever that person's standard of acceptance might be, therefore operating inside their worldview. And I think this is kind of one of those things that atheists tend to avoid. As for the final point in terms of a loving God who cares who someone sticks their genitals inside, I think anyone who is in a loving relationship with someone will attest the fact the other partner definitely cares who they stick their genitals inside in a loving relationship. So the anecdotal position of the idea that a loving personal God wanting to have a personal relationship, which also adheres to a humbleness and adherence to a subjective a perspective of moral code that is set up from his design, then that type of humbleness and submission to worship is part of the life path of a relationship with the divine. It's part of what he wanted to have. So anyway, I'll leave with that. I yield.
On 3 minutes, and hopefully I've remembered to unmute this time so everybody in the audience can hear me. Yeah, you may just deal with the fucking keyboard because I keep forgetting to unmute. That was bang on 3 minutes. So Rib, if you want to address Smokey's opening statement, and I will reset the timer up. And whenever you're ready, man.
Yeah, so I have the kind of privileged point tonight of being kind of able to hear not only Smokey's opening but also his answer. So I have mine's kind of half and half. It's mostly what we've just heard, by the way. Okay, so first off, the kind of general like mockery and ridicule. It's kind of, I mean, if you heard, or if a fully grown adult was to come up to you and say that, they believe in a literal, I don't know, tooth fairy, that they believe that it literally exists and that it's not parents putting, $1 or $2 bill underneath the pillow at night. That kind of does require a little bit of mockery and ridicule. So, I mean, obviously you don't see it that way because you actually believe it, but I'm just saying from our point of view, that's kind of what it's like. The ends don't always justify the means. Not always, not in every case. They do sometimes, obviously. There are cases where it does work, but not always. This is another one that I keep hearing, and it never fails to kind of semi-trigger me. Atheism is not a worldview. It's an answer to a question. And the question is asking you if you believe that a God exists. If your answer is no or I don't know, you're an atheist. That's it. That's all it is. So me being an atheist doesn't tell you anything about my worldview. I may have misheard you. I did write this down. I might not have kind of gotten the quote that you said before that, but I'm kind of unsure as to what this sticky territory that you mentioned was. Again, that's very possible that I just kind of didn't hear it. But anyway, just to kind of go back into what you were just saying there. I mean, honestly, depending on what you smoke before going horse riding, you might go on that trip where you ride a unicorn who's farting out rainbows. But this whole thing about the analogy of, well, it does matter because it's like you're in a relationship with God and therefore like and that's why he cares. Well, I mean, yeah, that would work if I was like in like the same type of so on the hypothetical that I was in a same-sex relationship, like my partner in that case caring if I cheated on him or if I stuck my pee-pee in someone else, then that would be only analogous if I was in a relationship with the literal God of the universe, in which case, of course, I'd bottom. I don't
Holy actual crap!
I don't really kind of have anything else to kind of say. Why, he's God. Of course I would.
2 minute warning.
I'm good, dude. I'm good. You can go on to the next bit.
Okay, so that was bang on 3 minutes as well, and we've established that ribs a bottom. So
I'm not buying a hypothetical.
Holy crap!
Hypothetical where I'm fucking the God of the universe. Okay.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
he is the God of the universe, you know.
Oh, okay. Holy crap! All right.
Right. Well, yeah, I think you've shocked Rib. Our Rib has shocked Smokey. Not sure.
That was a shock moment. Yeah, that was a shock moment.
It's
Caught me
the
off guard with
that
that one. Caught me off guard with that one.
Right, well, here in my land, it is just about to turn 11:30, so we've got we've got the guts of an hour for the back and forth. That'll bring it up. So, Smokey, I will let you run for half an hour. Please do try each other not to
half an hour.
not to scream. Well, you'll be in charge for a half an hour.
I get you.
know.
I get you. Okay.
And we will work from that. We will go there. We'll see how it goes, and try not to talk over each other. And then try to talk over each other. I want to try my flames. So, Smokey, I will hand semi-power to you and
Sure.
knock yourself out. Go for it.
Well, I guess maybe first I'll just address, because you kind of asked me to repeat the sticky territory, so I'll try to kind of summarize that.
That'd be great.
Bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sticky territory component is that your worldview, your perspective, everything you judge by, ultimately at the base level is supported by either just a basic axiom,
Something you accept as just being true without any, prior justification, like your ability to reason, your ability to rationalize with other beings, the fact that other beings are real, that you're not, just communicating with illusions. These are things you just kind of accept to operate, as a rational civil person in society. You don't need extra justification for those things. So you have a base level axioms that you just operate from. And you're considered rational for doing so. The theist does the exact same thing. It's just they draw an inferential line to a source for the reason that they're all ordered and the reason that they're all consistent and uniform. So it's like the idea that we both have a base axiom. Ours is more inferential, yours is more circular, but you the sticky territory is you using your circular base, level of justification to challenge ours. It just doesn't. That's very sticky territory. It's because then you have to justify yours to a level that probably isn't realistically viable. See what I'm saying? Because you have to basically then move from saying, okay, no, I don't operate from circular reasoning or axioms at the base. I have something substantial to justify my logic and reason from, and this is what it is, as opposed to just operating the way most human beings do and just accept it. I'll let you respond to that in a second, but let me also just real quick, and I'll finish with this final part. The claim, you brought up the tooth fairy, and I thought that was interesting. I've heard that analogy a couple of times. I think even Matt Dillahunty's used it. And also the UFOs. And I like both of those examples. I'd like to unpack those further. But what I want to just is leave with this before I let you respond is, do you believe the evidence for the tooth fairy is equivalent to that of a God claim?
No.
Okay, perfect. And you can respond to the rest, please. I took a lot of time there.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I sort of think that I know kind of roughly where you're going with this, or I think that I've kind of heard something similar with it. It's kind of, and you can, of course, interrupt me if I'm wrong. But I think that kind of what you're basically saying is, okay, so if I don't have God to kind of appeal to as like the source of all that is like ultimate or foundation or whatever.
I'll give you credit. It is a form of presuppositional argumentation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It is not pure presup, clearly, but yeah, you picked up on it. Yeah.
Okay. Is that the kind of argument that you were going on?
Well, it's close to it, but it's not. I'm not actually basing it on God as the primary form of the argument. I'm just saying that each side is basically, in terms of coherency or sufficiency of worldview, they're both equivalent. There's not, because ultimately at the end of the day, I'll even accept that you could claim that my view or acceptance of God is purely axiomatic. I would even, for the sake of this argument here, accept that, even though I do believe I have evidentiary chains of evidence to support the axiom. I, for the sake of the argument, will just avoid all of that and say that I'm operating from the same base level coherency that you guys are. So to challenge it is basically undermining your own, because you're operating with the same base level values I am. They're just reworked. They're just inferred instead of circular.
Okay.
And this is to answer the question of the debate about sufficiency, because again, the answer of the question of sufficiency to me is pretty purely a psychological topic. Because like, you can say to me, why should I believe in God? And that's a perfectly viable, valid question that many atheists ask. Why should I believe in God? The problem is no one can read your mind and tell you what they think would convince you that God exists, or if what would convince you is even necessarily, how do I say this, realistic to the nature of the claim. Do you remember when I mentioned the divine hiddenness thing during our one debate, and I had said that inside the nature of the claim is the component of God's divine hiddenness, which was attached to his righteousness. Yeah. And if you read in between the lines in the Genesis accounts, the early accounts of mankind's interaction with the angel of the Lord, they had a cultural understanding or a belief that if they saw God, they would die. Now, this is one of those nuances inside Scripture I don't believe anyone had a reason to lie about, which is why I tend to give it a little bit of extra credit. So the fact that that is thematically consistent all throughout Scripture, that God in his presence before sin would have to judge it, and you actually see this kind of happen with the Shekinah glory, which is residing in the tribe of Israel, there was suddenly a higher standard for obedience and adherence because of the accountability that was delivered by the actual presence of God. So that's one of the things that, in terms of challenging the claim, like for instance, why doesn't God just show up? Well, it's inside the nature of the claim that that's not how he operates. You get what I'm saying? So that wouldn't be a sufficient or realistic gauge against the existence of the Christian God, I guess is how I would put it. Feel free. I'm sorry. That was a long-winded response. Go ahead.
No, you're good. There was a few things in there that I kind of felt like I couldn't answer the way that I normally would unless it was kind of my time. So Like,
Well, no, I mean, and yeah, no, Rib, don't feel
that's
like
not like a dodge or anything. It's
Right.
just
No, no,
No, well, you
I
can
know.
lead the questioning, for your round, man. But if your answer is directly relatable to what
Yeah,
Smokey has said, go for it.
take time because I want to hear the response too. It's not like I don't, I don't want to hear.
Spend more time in the response. We'll spend more time worrying about the time and talking about it. Just go with the
there we
response.
go.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, would it obviously kind of like help if God came down or like appeared through the clouds and said, like, I'm here, it's me, I'm the God of the Bible? Like, would that help? Yeah, obviously, but kind of scratching that out is like something that's probably not going to happen. I mean, in the analogy that I used in my opening, that would be the equivalent to seeing the dog. But I'm kind of happy. I would be happy if we got the types of evidence tonight that is everything that is leading to the fact that you own a dog, absent the actual dog. So to kind of pull that full circle, like all of the evidence that you have that leads to the conclusion that God exists without God actually appearing through the clouds. That's the type of thing that we're like kind of going for. So I don't really need the whole like. It's not that I'm okay with divine hiddenness, but I don't need that to be like the case, I guess.
I appreciate that. No, thank you for that. I would say, and I accept your analogy because I think this has been thrown around a lot. Maybe you don't mind, Rib. We could unpack this just a second. And it's this statement. I kind of hear it thrown around a lot. Maybe you agree with it. Maybe you use it. I think you kind of did in your opening. It's the whole extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yeah. So, and that's kind of thrown around a lot. I've responded to it a couple times on my channel, but maybe we could just take a few minutes and maybe we could unpack that together, just on a philosophical level. So I guess, first of all, okay, let me start here. Would we be able to arbitrarily decide what an extraordinary claim would be? I think we could probably both agree that between 2 or 3 minds, or even a group of minds, you could come up with a pretty clear idea of what something extraordinary would be. Just something outside of normative social understanding. Like, I mean, dragons could exist, but if no one's ever seen them, we all just kind of operate a priori. Dragons don't exist.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So like we have that kind of like level of groupthink where we accept stuff. So if someone comes up with a claim and it's extraordinary, we'll accept that as being non-normative. We'll agree on that definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's clear enough, at least to use. Even though there's an arbitrary value to it, we'll all both agree that we can at least probably all agree there's some sort of objective line to be drawn in a non-normative case. However, once we move to the other side of the equation, extraordinary evidence. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know, like, and maybe you can help walk me through this in terms of your perspective. What have you seen in the real world that you might classify as, wow, that is some extraordinary evidence?
I mean, you kind of said that as if it was like one piece. It's
not okay, thank you.
Necessarily one piece.
Thank you. Unpack that for me, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be like a body of evidence to kind of bring up something that was said in the MDD debates. It wouldn't be one fossil that would be proving evolution. No, it's quite a lot of them, and it's not just the fossils either. It's all of the other things. So it's like a body of extraordinary evidence.
Beautiful. So it wouldn't be like one proof. Like, I mean, it could be, right? I mean, it could be like, I mean, like, I know this is not how we operate, and I can't think of an example where this is actually the case, except maybe in mathematics, but like where you just have a proof and you just know, this is the evidence.
I guess the kind of one example of like one piece being extraordinary evidence would be God kind of poking his head like in the
right. Okay.
And saying there. That would be the one piece. But
okay, that's fair. Sure.
Since we kind of, I think we're both agreeing just to kind of rule that out as like a possibility. I can't think of one thing that is an extraordinary.
No, I'd go with that. I'd go with that, and I'd give that to you. And I would say that's the case. Now, let me unpack that for just a second. Do you think that? And I'd agree with you. That would certainly be extraordinary evidence. Would you say that is something that everyone on Earth would accept as extraordinary evidence, or would that be evidence that? Let me rephrase this. I'm sorry, I'm going to make a mess of this. Let me rephrase this question properly. Would that evidence, even though we'll both agree that it's extraordinary, probably even a good chunk of the world would agree it's extraordinary, is that evidence immune to skepticism? Like would people still potentially convince themselves to not believe at that point?
I mean, possibly, but I think that there's a fine line between where you are thinking skeptically, like, correctly, and when you're just being skeptical for the sake of being skeptical. Like, there's a point where, like, I don't know, to even kind of give like an example of it, it would be like, and I don't know why, it would be like if I punched MathPig and you were saying, well, look,
gently, and lower than the head.
Gently, of course.
And not the face.
And you, Smokey, being the, like, ultimate skeptic, you can't rule out that a particularly vicious gust of wind came and hit him at just the right angle. So it's possibly that I hit him. It's possible, but I can't. That's obviously probably going to be there. But I mean, I think for the vast majority of people, yeah, I think if God was to poke his head through the clouds, I mean, I'd believe if he said that, yeah, like, it's me and I'm there and this is, you know.
Right. No, and I get that. And actually, I appreciate that on the terms of, like, this is the thing that I reach to in terms of some of these arguments, and the way that I look at it is a question of where is that line that we draw or we look at and say, I'm either being skeptical or I'm being cynical. And I when we talk about the extraordinary evidence, that's what I worry about. And I love how you presented it, because I thought that was one of the more honest and direct answers about what would constitute extraordinary evidence that I've ever heard, which is the body of collective evidence that points to the existence of the divine. And this is why, in terms of our last debate, I had mentioned this, of wanting to really get a keen line, an understanding between the two of us on what really constitute evidence. And this was a good exercise, because my argument is that we infer the existence of God from a body of evidence. And it is everything from the terrestrial to the biological, to the cosmological, to the teleological, to the ontological, to the epistemological. That we have all of these varying chains of evidence that give us a justification for an understanding of the order of the universe. It also supplants what would be, I would call, a very nihilistic view of existence with something that has meaningfulness and purpose. So I wonder sometimes, I'll stop after this. I wonder sometimes if the atheists are actually not just questioning, whether it's good to disbelieve in God, but what the byproducts of that are. What type of subsequent worldview realities are people psychologically being pulled into and indulging from the acceptance of the idea that, well, you're just matter in motion. You don't really have any meaning. You're just a bubbling bag of chemicals. What's wrong with that bubbling bag of chemicals hurting another bubbling bag of chemicals? What is the moral constraint? What is the terminator? What is something that keeps you from only seeking after your own best good instead of the good of others? I'll yield.
Yeah, okay, so we've kind of delved into morality there at the end.
Apologies, it just flowed.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna kind of stay away from that, just because it's not actually the topic.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I was expecting you to hold to it. I apologize.
That's 15 minutes. I do apologise for me not jumping in as much as maybe I should or anything there. We've been trying to sort some audio issues with a fucking new setup, and I never thought to change for me. Please apologise for the echo. If there is me talking, I will mute when I'm not. But that's your 15-minute warning, Smokey, for you leading. Just giving you a heads up. We can bounce back and forth, but
could we do something a little unconventional? Could we switch it up? Let's give Rib control.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest the same thing.
Because that feels a little fair too. I feel like I kind of been going long-winded here. I'd like to give Rib a little chance.
Rib, if you want to lead the conversation for the next 15 minutes, we'll work off that then, and hopefully sure. I'll try and get my audio sorted.
No problem. Yeah, I guess so. I actually have a little bit of like a not off topic question, but a much quicker one to answer. Have you always believed, or was there a point in time where you were like a non-believer, or
Yeah, I was an atheist at one point. Yeah, a
okay?
hateist of vitriol. I was the type that I was pretty sure God didn't exist because of how I viewed him as a contradictory entity. But
Mhm.
if he did exist, I hated him. That would best summarize my view for probably I would say the better part of 7 8 years of my life probably.
Okay. So what convinced you to believe that he is there, that
Um,
he exists?
it just I would say that I've said this on my channel a few times. It's kind of like it ended up being the most sensical way to interpret reality, I guess. Like I wasn't one of those guys that got a supernatural, God showed up in my, closet and shined through a big light and said, "I'm here for you, come serve me." Like I never had any type of like real what I would call supernatural experience or like I mean there's even some charismatics that condemn me to hell because I can't like specify I spoke in tongues or had a had a charismatic born again experience, so like I don't know, I guess I just reached a point where after it was a very important thing to understand because if it is true it's your immortal soul that's on the line. And I was wondering maybe I guess let me put it this way, I guess I was wondering maybe if I was being arrogant by requiring God to adhere to my standard of verifiability. And I think I maybe had a moment of humility, maybe, where that changed. And so when I started to interpret the information a little bit differently, and I also got confronted by some pretty brutal harsh, not harsh, but they were brutal to me and appropriately so, preachers and Jews who called me out for some of my disgusting views, and I appreciated them for it. So it was kind of just a catalyzed effect. I guess you would say now that I'm a believer after the fact, I look back on that and attribute it to God, but would I have attributed it to God at the time? No, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I, g- hmm. It's interesting what you just said there because you said one extremely interesting thing, which was like, was it fair for you to kind of hold God to your previously held standard, right? Or it was something on those lines, right?
Right. Yeah, because I had kind of had I was the guy that was in the driveway really ticked off at God because my life had taken a certain path and screaming at the heavens, with my fist, like, why don't you ever show up when I need you? Like I was that type of guy. So like to me, it was kind of like I felt God was obligated towards me. And I guess once I let that go, my perspectives really changed a lot. I'm trying to be like, I mean, this was a really complex like
Hmm.
life path for me. It's hard to really make it kind of this simple, but it's kind of like just giving you snapshots as best as I can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that you won't take offense to this, but if that was the type of part you were a very bad atheist. Um, so, I
Well,
just kind
I
of like.
preached against a lot of theist thoughts during the day, and I listened to Matt Dillahunty, and I listened to Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens. I was big fans of them. Read their books. I saw the deity the way modern atheists painted the deity,
Mhm.
which was a contradictory, amoral entity, therefore couldn't exist. That's what I saw him as.
Okay, so I mean, like, was there any like one thing, or was there like a collection of things? And if it was a collection of things, what's the biggest piece of evidence that convinced you that God exists? Not just like that, some preachers or some angry Jews or something like that were kind of, calling you out on something.
Well,
Like,
see,
was
and
there
it's
one?
yeah, it's back to that thing of the extraordinary evidence. I couldn't say it's one thing. Like
Mhm.
it's that body of
Okay.
stuff that kind of makes up the like unpacking every nuance of each one of the things that was my own personal validation. It's hard to it was kind of my own path, so it's hard to unpack, and even if I did, would it necessarily mean anything to you? That type of thing.
Okay, well, I mean, like, what was like the biggest thing that was like, if Okay,
Sure.
so
No, I could give you a couple big ones. I wouldn't say they're like necessarily core, but they're pretty huge.
okay,
I
okay.
would say the fine tuning of the universe with so many super fine, narrow constants, all leading up to the potential existence of human life. The unexplainable naturalistic ideas and hypothesis that could possibly explain abiogenesis. The idea that complex biology seems to require an intelligent agent to act upon our universe in order for it to manifest. Just inferential lines of logic from the nature of our reality, the way I perceive it, all of it kind of just coalescing to directing to the existence of some sort of higher mind. Now, from there, I have to extrapolate whether or not it's personal, because at that point, I'm only a deist. So then became a pursuit of seeing if I could notice whether or not a deity seemed to want to communicate with us. And I felt like I did validate that in the scripture of the Bible, especially after I compared it to the revelation of the Quran and a few of the Vedas, particularly the supernatural claims in the Vedas.
Okay, so it was a lot of arguments then that kind of swayed you, right?
Well, I mean, arguments. Arguments are evidence in a way, so I guess I'll give it to you. Sure. A lot of different arguments convinced me, just like a lot of different arguments convinced me into atheism too. But I mean, I couldn't give full credit to atheist arguments for carrying me out of theism. I had also adopted a fairly toxic, predeterministic, almost Calvinistic view of reality, which leads you to things like where you'll think things like this, like, no matter what I do, God's already determined I'm going to do it. Like, that's the type of thinking that'll lead you to. So like, even your sin, like, God wanted you to do your sin. Like, he returned, like, this is the type of like thinking that I had adopted because I had found some deterministic Calvinistic philosophies. And so I adopted, I would almost call like a more extreme form of Reformed theology. And that really opened up the door to me accepting the atheistic claims, because a lot of atheistic arguments are aligned along the attack against that type of deity, the very deterministic deity that decided that he wanted, child rape. That's kind of usually how the God of the Bible gets end up painted, and that's the Calvinistic view.
Yeah, all right, okay, so you kind of said a few things there. I guess my so, and this is probably what's almost probably going to insult you even a little bit.
Wouldn't be like you at all.
No. You were an atheist for bad reasons, and I think you're a Christian for very bad reasons as well. Like, the thing
Well, why are you allowed to decide for me what good reasons are?
Well, because I mean, okay, so if I was to kind of say to you the same type of thing that I said in, I think it was my opening, that if I was to say to you that last night I was abducted by aliens, taken to a foreign planet, impregnated, and then brought back to Earth, and now several hours later here I am talking to you, would you believe me? And I'm going to take a guess without you even answering that you're going to say no. And my question is, where up along the lines of evidence do I have to present to you, and the standard and the types of evidence do I have to present for you to believe
Sure.
me? And I think that we all do have like different, we all draw that line in different places, but I think, like, for me, and it could just be like, I think that my line is kind of further along than what yours is, but that's what's kind of giving me the opinion that you have believed and do believe.
Well, I think I don't know how you can necessarily judge for another person what is good or bad reasons to judge anything, because it's just an imposition on another person. It's a violation of their free will, their right to decide upon their own right.
Well, I mean, it's kind of going off of like,
all you can say is it would be bad reasons for you. That's all you can say.
well, yeah, but that's the kind of point and the kind of like wider argument, or the like wider fight, is to try and get everybody to a standard, not even necessarily mine. I'm not saying mine is like, the like A++ gold standard or whatever.
Well, may I use
Um,
your UFO anecdote for a second to kind of maybe use it to maybe clear this up a little bit? Because
Sure.
like, okay, so like let's put it a couple different ways. So first of all, you have a UFO. You tell me you've been.
If I
abducted
can
by a
just
UFO.
say, Rib, 5 more minutes and that'll be 15 minutes for you. So 5 more minutes left after Smokey if you want to maybe ask 1 or 2 last questions.
Okay. Should I yield it back to him because I'm about to ask a question?
No. Make your point, Smokey. Make your point, and then
Okay.
sure, if we run over,
I don't
we're
wanna
not
be
that stringent.
controlling
It's not
time
modern day
here.
debate.
Okay.
We're
All right,
flexible.
So if you told me, yeah, I wouldn't believe you. If like my partner, my intimate partner told me, like, and I knew they didn't have any reason to lie to me, would I still like doubt it? Would I like have other ideas? Like maybe they're losing their freaking mind, possibly. But like if I'm asleep and my wife is abducted and my kids see it and my aunt in the other room heard a bunch of commotion and bright lights, what you could do is you could have a situation where corroborating evidence sometimes changes it. And this is why we go back to an extraordinary evidence claim. The idea that you were abducted by aliens is an extraordinary claim. It should be backed by extraordinary evidence. We've already agreed with that. So what is extraordinary evidence? We've also already agreed it's a body of evidence. It's corroborating evidence that all points to something. So in that case, yes, we could still draw a line, even in your anecdote, to what would be, I would call, more normatively rational. But even then, it's not necessarily going to be something that's going to convince a cynic. And that's why I think unless we can draw a line for each individual person on whether they're operating as a cynic or a skeptic, we have a problem. Because then if I don't know you're a cynic, then I can't trust your judgment or whether or not I have good reasons. You know what I mean? So then you're stuck proving to me you're not a cynic.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wouldn't really kind of say that we were to do it on like a person by person basis. I was to say that like we should that, and this is kind of stealing from Matt a little bit. I say a little bit, it's 100% stealing from him. And he loved this quote so much he made it on he has a few false things as possible, and truth is that which comports to reality. So I think that we should all kind of accept that, and we should all have a high enough standard whereas we're not duped, and whereas we don't fall for things that are clearly false, but not so high that even in the face of overwhelming evidence that you're kind of saying, no, I don't know. Like, we shouldn't get to that point, but we shouldn't be like, there is obviously a line, because obviously everybody has some standard. So like, obviously you don't believe like every single claim of a religion, otherwise you would be a Christian, a Jew, a Hindu, a Buddhist, etc. The point is that you have a standard somewhere, and like I'm trying to kind of figure out where that standard is, because it's either more than mine, in which case I need to upgrade mine and you need to kind of present the evidence that convince you and therefore convince me, especially if my standard is lower. Or if not, if your standard is lower than mine, then unfortunately I have to drag you kicking and screaming back up to my standard. So that's the kind of the exercise that I'm trying to do tonight, basically.
Right. I can appreciate that, Rib. And I guess at a certain level too, I mean, again, I've given, I would say, evidentiary inferences of why I believe the existence of a deity, and certainly also a personal deity. But to say, like let me take it to another level. I think one of, and I do mean this when I say this, I think one of the better validators of Christianity is Islam. I know that sounds insane, but Islam is the perfect example of
I'm so sorry I lagged out there. I'm so sorry I lagged out there for about 10 seconds.
Oh, no problem. I was just saying, I was saying one of the validators.
2-minute warning, so if you want to ask one last question, Rib, after Smokey answers.
Sure. One of the great validators, I think, for Christianity is actually Islam. Like, if you want to compare what I believe is a true religion with a true I would say spiritual text, compared to what is the Quran and the Hadith, which are just a blatant fabrication of bizarre situations and lack of any real supernatural claims. Once you kind of compare the two, that was one of those things that helped me, because of course in my early pursuit, was to look at some of the larger religions, to see if what their viability was, to exactly as you so poignantly put it, what comports more with reality. And that is why I landed on the Judeo. And again, what I would say is, with that statement on that shirt, any Christian could wear that shirt. Like, I don't think there's anyone on the planet that wouldn't agree with wanting to wear that shirt. I would wear that shirt as a spoof. Just because, it's just a fact. We all operate with that. It just doesn't really mean anything to us, because again, it's back to that arbitrary decider, of like who decides what is sufficient for each person, and that can only be the individual. Oh, yo.
Well, it shouldn't be arbitrary, and I am well aware that I don't have that much time. It shouldn't be arbitrary. We should have we should almost kind of look to the strength in what is, in this case, the weakest link. So we should go to the most skeptical person, the most, like, if God was to poke his head from the clouds and somebody would still say, no, I don't think that he is there, we should go to that sort of standard momentarily to be able to rule out all of the bad types of evidence and all the bad arguments.
Would you give it to me that, based upon the Christian God claim that I presented, that we kind of agreed upon about God sticking his head through the clouds, that if someone had set that as a standard of evidence for the Judeo-Christian God, that they would be on the side of cynicism, not skepticism? Would you give me that?
I think that they will be closer to cynicism, but I don't think that it's too far apart from 50-50, if you kind of follow what I'm saying.
Okay. It's not like we can draw a line in the sand where this is cynical and this is skeptic. I'm trying to get a more of like an anecdotal perspective of,
we'll use that as a point, Smokey. That question, we'll switch back over and give you your 15 minutes again. So we'll use that as your 15-minute starter. Go on ahead.
Okay, awesome. So I guess where I'm taking this is to try and, like, for someone to want to set a arbitrary standard of this is what evidence should be sufficient for, or this is the standard of evidence that everyone should accept, then there has to be a really strong argument support to accept that standard of evidence, and why. And I don't generally see that. What I see generally is claims to empiricism, materialism, or methodological naturalism. And in the outer eras, even though we're not discussing it, moral relativism. So, these things I see to be proposed and put out there and kind of used as guidelines for judgment for everyone else, without what I found to be really good justification. Do you have really good evidence that, naturalism is true, or empiricism is true, or that we can only govern reality by what we see? I'll yield that to you.
I just kind of find that to be a very weird question. Is empiricism true? It's like saying, is red true? Or it's like saying,
I apologize. Let me rephrase. Is the principle of judging reality by empiricism true? Is that valid? I should have specified that. Apologies.
I think that, like, empiricism is probably the highest standards of evidence that you can ask for.
Agreed.
And to be an empiricist, that, like, you would only be convinced by things that you can kind of demonstrate for yourself, and that's the kind of, like, little issue that I take with that, is for yourself. If I was to believe things that only I could demonstrate myself, I wouldn't own this mic or this laptop or basically fucking anything that I own, because I don't know how they work or whatever. But, like, I just
would you okay let me put it this way. Would you admit that empiricism would never be able to tell you about the existence of something non-empirical?
Well, what would be non-empirical? Give me an example. Give me, like, a placeholder to put in there.
I don't know. Anything that could exist that doesn't necessarily have substance. Let's, for the sake of argument, the soul, or dark matter, or dark energy. The type of thing that you can't see, you have to infer. Basically you have to extrapolate in order to understand that it exists. Like, is it fair to say that empiricism will fail to verify or validate the existence of anything that isn't empirically verified?
Um, I mean, I think that like when there is not an overwhelming body of evidence to kind of support the existence, that's probably not the right word to use, of dark matter. Um, like even though that's not there, but you don't necessarily have any evidence that would state that it is anything other than that, and this is kind of um even if that was just a placeholder to put there until such time as something better came along, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But it's when people, so it would be it where I come into problems and where I come into issues is if people were to say, well, no, according to dark matter, then gays shouldn't be allowed to marry who they want to, and these sorts of things. That's where we're gonna kind of go, no, you're gonna want to demonstrate that that's actually there before I take it fucking seriously.
No, I wasn't saying dark matter cares where you stick your genitals.
I know, but I'm just saying to kind of you see where I'm coming from, right?
I see where you're going.
If my audio issues were better, you would hear me laughing in the background.
Outstanding. Okay, so no, I get what I was trying to draw to, Rib, and I'll try to just kind of put a bullseye on it here, and I'll let you kind of respond. Is that like I think I kind of see this in terms of many challenges from the atheistic front is to judge the claim of the deity through those lenses: materialism, naturalism, these things that are naturally part of the atheist framework, just by nature of them not believing in a deity. It's just part of your natural, dissection of reality, pretty much by law of excluded middle, law of non-contradiction. You don't really have much of a choice on that matter. So kind of absorbing these things and looking at the reality through these lenses is what you're judging the viability of the claim. And I guess to try and really make this as clear as I can, I'm just wondering about the justification if you can't possibly use those things to verify the existence of God. Like, if that's your standard and God can't possibly fit in any one of those verified metrics of validation, then you don't have a realistic standard of which to validate the existence of God. Did that follow? Did you get where I'm going with that?
I think so.
I feel free to go ahead and respond. I mean, if it seems like I did a crappy job, I'll try to correct you.
No, I don't necessarily think that you did like a crappy job or anything.
I do apologize. I'm a little tired, so I apologize.
No,
it's earliest for you. Are you not in the bloody West Coast? It's the fucking earliest for you.
I know it's 4 o'clock. It's 4 o'clock p.m., but I didn't sleep particularly well last night.
It's after midnight for me and Rib. It's after midnight for me and Rib. You're all right.
Yeah, it's sluggy, fuzzy, smoky day is what it is. So yeah.
I've totally forgotten what you would fucking.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's my fault.
Okay, no. Okay, here's what. No, I can bring it back. Okay, so what I was drawing to is that if like an atheist or a naturalist, or again, because if you're atheist, if you're denying the existence of God, I would expect by law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, you're falling in the belief framework of basically methodological naturalism or materialism or any one of these things that basically equates for the non-existence of a deity to explain the existence of everything. So, and whichever one it is going to carry with it a perspective, a lens that you're judging reality through. And if your standard of evidence is inside these realms, materialism, naturalism, stuff like that, and there's something that exists outside what those realms can prove, then your standard of evidence is cynical, not skeptical, because you can't use those worldviews you've adopted to actually ascertain whether or not there's a deity beyond. Like, you can't use empiricism to judge the existence of a non-physical thing, because empiricism deals with only what you can see and what you can observe and what you can experience. It has to do with that very direct, tangible grasp of the object. So you wouldn't be able to use empiricism to say, well, empiricism is my standard of a deity. Okay, great. That'll work for, I guess, maybe 90-ish% of the deities out there as to why they don't show up to you, but it's not coherent for the claim of the Christian deity with the divine hiddenness. So that was my point, is that will you concede, at least at some level, sometimes atheist claims might be unrealistic? They might be requiring the deity to fit inside a paradigm or standard of evidence that he can't possibly fit inside, I guess is where I'm going at.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the fault of the big bad atheists. I would kind of say that that's the fault of the limit on what we can test. So we can only test the natural world. If you're kind of claiming that, and I'm not even necessarily claiming that you are, I'm sure that you probably would agree with this, but just for the kind of sake of fairness, I'm not going to paint you with this. If you were to say that, that like God is an immaterial mind that exists outside of space and time, that's cool. We don't have a way to test that exists.
Right.
There is no way that we can even begin to rule that in as a possibility. So I guess kind of from my perspective and kind of from the side that I'm doing this debate from, I kind of guess another question or another way that I could kind of question my stance is, why have you ruled it in? Considering that we don't have a method by which to do so. We don't have a method to test it, so how can you rule it in?
Well, that's exactly the point I'm making, is because I know it's not testable. So if I was to set the standard of evidence for it to be testable, knowing it's not testable, I'm not being realistic. That's like, see, I had to evolve my understanding of what the God claim was. I had a very basic understanding of God when I was a kid, and probably more so, loosely when I got older, with a predeterministic view of reality, where I was willing to attribute the idea that God was determining everything around me. It was very simple, but it was the idea of, like, the atheist challenge. You've heard this many times, Rib. The idea that God is all powerful and all good, so he can't allow evil.
5-minute warning, Smokey. 5-minute warning.
This is the typical age-old, Cartesian challenge of the problem, of evil inside a God claim, as this is one of the things that stemmed from it. And, the idea is that doesn't actually coherently match what the Christian God claim is, which is why usually when we get the challenges to the nature of the claim, it doesn't even fit what our claim is. And this is one of those examples. Like, to say that God needs to empirically verify himself is to expect a standard outside the nature of the claim. And that's kind of where I'm going with it, is to say, like, I can understand saying I only want to believe what is testable. Well, that's great, but there's lots of things then that you're going to be disqualified from being able to believe simply because they're not testable. Picture it this way, like atheists, to me, let me put it, just draw a bullseye on it with an anecdote. To me, I feel like atheists, for the existence of a God, they expect to see lightning in a bottle. They want us to capture essence of God or power of God or something of God and have this, supernatural, testable, oh my gosh, we don't know what it is, but it screams that God exists, piece of evidence. And that's just not something that's ever been provided, and doesn't seem to be within the nature of what God wants to provide in terms of his relationship to this reality. He created it, so he respects it. Like, it's like he chose to limit himself by his own choice to limit himself, but because only in that way can you have a certain reality where you have the type of interaction with a being that is actually righteous. You can't just, how do I put this? Make people moral, intellectual slaves. Like, it's a violation of the nature of morality. And if God has morality as a component of his eternal nature, that means he's bound to create us in a certain way. And violating our free will, making us a forceful moral slave, is not something that seems viable, in terms of his nature. That seems to be a contradiction of terms. We need to have the opportunity to love and to love freely.
You have got 2 minutes left, Smokey, if you want to finish up, or if you want to pass on to Rib and give Rib a go.
I said a lot there. Yeah, I'm fine if he wants to respond or go into question that he might have. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the last 15 minutes with Rib in charge, so
sure.
We'll go with that.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
perfect. Thank you. Rib, over to you.
Okay. So yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you had kind of said in the last kind of portion of what you have just said there. You know, I mean, I think that we're all kind of in favor of gay rights and trans rights, and that's why you should be able to love whoever you want to love. I say that somewhat in jest, knowing Smokey who you are. No offense.
We just have a different view of how to love those people. That's all. I promise.
Yeah, we'll just
Okay.
not go down that route. We're not going to go down that route because I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to agree with Rib, and I'm going to ask him to continue on with his questioning.
Yeah, I just okay. So my kind of problem, I guess, right, and it's not just with you, Smokey, although it is kind of with you, unfortunately, is that so often when I kind of ask,
Don't fucking
as to
antagonize him.
why they well, you wanted a dumpster fire and you wanted to use your.
All right, then go on. Fucking poke at him. Poke at him. Go for it. Go for it.
Morality? Are we going to morality? Is that what's happening?
No, we're not going into morality,
Okay,
unfortunately.
okay.
I guess kind of like my kind of biggest problem is that like so often when I ask Christians, you know, like why they believe, or if they were atheist and they're now Christians, you know, like why did they convert or whatever, right? Or like why did they start to believe? So often what I hear is, oh, it was this argument or this argument or this argument, and I'm like, I personally, and then like, I mean, it's entirely possible this is just a fault on my behalf, but I personally don't see why an argument, absence the evidence, is good enough. Because what you have said is that like it's, you know, an immaterial mind that's outside of space and time. I mean, I don't understand how simply through arguments alone that you could even in the realm of possibility include that on the list, because we have no way to demonstrate or to test. So okay, so hypothetically, I am wrapping up. Hypothetically, if there was a list of like 5 things, right? If there was a list of 5 options as to whatever, right? Why, or as to what the like cause of the universe or whatever is, right? If you were to include on that list something that exists outside of this universe that we have absolutely no measurable in any way, shape, or form, we have no way to test if this thing is even an option that can be included on the list of possibilities. If you're then ruling out the other 4 and is left with the one that says it's a thing that exists outside the universe, I mean, that's the kind of problem that we're kind of running into, is that I don't know how you included that on the list of things that it might be.
It's a little weird to hear you say like I'm just relying only on arguments, like, and I'm not. I mean, what it is all of us make judgments based upon philosophy and arguments that are extrapolated from certain things or certain concrete facts or certain axioms.
Mhm.
You know, we all rely upon arguments for evidence. We rely upon arguments for evidence in court. We rely upon arguments for evidence in science and evolutionary theory. We rely upon arguments in hypothesis. We rely upon arguments in the dissection of data everywhere. Like, we wouldn't have understanding of pretty much anything without the arguments being extrapolated from the data. I mean, the number of shark attacks and the number of ice cream sales in a year don't mean anything unless you're extrapolating data from them. You know, like for instance, you know, just to give an idea of causation and correlation not always matching, is this instance where shark attacks and ice cream sales go up at the same time every year. And people will correlate to that causation that, well, shark attacks and ice cream sales are connected to each other. They're not. There's a third extenuating factor called the summer heat. As the summer heat rises, people eat more ice cream and they go swimming more often. So therefore, both of those things, you know, rise. There's a third extenuating factor not connected. So we use arguments everywhere to help us make sense of data. That is part of our chain of evidence that we use. So I don't know where you're kind of coming from, just kind of taking a crap on argumentation, especially when I'm saying that, you know, the argumentation to me is attempting to validate that which comports most to reality. And I'll finish with this, just to kind of maybe draw it in a different direction other than what I've done so far in this debate. I'll go ahead and bring up Pascal's wager, because it's certainly one of those things that played a role in my perspective as well, which is the idea is this.
Guys, we're buffering.
The universe.
We're buffering.
The cosmos.
We're buffering.
The biology. Sorry?
I said we were buffering there for a wee minute. I think we're back now.
Okay.
Yeah. Fucking damn bloody new setup. Yes, this is wonderful thing. Sorry, I think we're back now. Okay, I'm going to shut up again.
All right, no problem. And just to finish on this, I would say the fine-tuning, the biology, all these things is part of what we're using to extrapolate and use as argumentation, because the idea is that naturalistic mechanisms provide no viable explanation for any of this. Or at least what I should say is that naturalistic explanations, to me, and I'll admit this is an arbitrary decision of my level of sufficiency for the God claim, I will admit it, to me, relying upon naturalistic mechanisms to explain all of the fine-tuning necessary components in our universe and biology and terrestrial geology and all the stuff that allowed us to even be here. All of this reads out to me as being one of those justifications for accepting, basically the idea that a deity must exist. I mean, these are the type of things that I carry through. So
Is towards like all of these like scientific conclusions and stuff like that, and you would list a number of other things, but that was definitely one of them. In a lot of the instances that you had mentioned, the evidence speaks for itself. You don't necessarily need the arguments that go with them. Sure, they might help and they might help convince people, but the evidence is there and it speaks for itself. Just for example,
we're buffering again. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go and run and get stuff. You talk away. Hopefully it'll come back.
Are we still live? Yeah.
I mean, I can hear you just fine.
Still live here and Stroll and run and get a lead. Just keep talking.
No problem. So not to kind of bring up like a red herring or anything, and I don't necessarily want us to kind of go into this, but as I have stated to you before, I mean, the evidence in the DNA code alone is enough to prove common ancestry, therefore kind of lead evidence towards evolution. But the point is, and why I bring that up, is that because you don't need you don't necessarily need somebody to come along and say, well, there's this thing called evolution and it says this, and this would kind of go along with what that's. The point is that you don't need somebody to do that if the evidence kind of speaks for itself. But just to kind of give a quick answer to Pascal's wager, because I honestly find that laughable. Pascal's wager says, well, if you might as well believe in the Christian God, right? You might as well, because if you don't, well, then you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity.
Well, but just if I may,
you do, then you're going to go to well, that's Pascal's wager, right?
Yeah, but that's not really how I painted it. I kind of was more along the lines of probabilities, like as in.
I mean, I get that, but that's literally what Pascal's wager is what I was.
Yeah, I was just saying that for the sake of trying to draw more of a colloquial recognition of kind of where I was going with. I'm not using clearly. I mean, I'm not using purely Pascal's wager here, but yeah, no, you're right. That is the very base level, basic interpretation of Pascal's wager. You're right. It's been carried forward pretty deep in many levels, even by mathematicians this day and age, which I don't even agree with. I was just saying, for me, it's that type of thing because it's based upon betting on what I thought was the better probability of the explanation of reality. That's why I kind of said it that way. I was trying to draw it round circle for you in the audience.
I mean, I guess so, but I mean, like, to kind of go off of Pascal's wager and the probability thing, I mean, like, the flaw in Pascal's wager is that it's only including like one of the religions. So
correct,
for example,
correct. And by the way, that's the basic level. And I'm trying to operate with a deeper level of it, that on the board of consideration, all the other possibilities do exist, and each one is given their own value of coherency to each individual. So the idea to me, when I'm thinking of Pascal's wager in the pure sense, like what you're pitching, I'm not pitching it. I wouldn't be thinking of it at its base level like that, where it's only the singular, universal Christian God claim. It's that each one of the claims has a value, and which one is more probable. That's more along the lines I'm talking about. Like Islam, once you look at it, I mean, the comparison of that versus Christianity is pretty blatant and stark, in my opinion.
I mean, I get that, but I mean, like, one of the kind of unwritten premises, and this is kind of why I don't really kind of get. I mean, like, you could have kind of said this in a different way, but seeing as you like unwritten kind of underlying thing in that is all things being equal. If you believe, then you get the reward, and if you don't, then you get a punishment. So you might as well believe, because if you're wrong, well, then nothing, and if you're right, then you get punishment. But the point is that, like, in keeping with that, all things being equal, yeah, you might get a reward if you're right, but if the Muslims are right, then you're going to be punished. If the Hindus are right, then you're going to be punished. The point
Right.
is that it's not a 50-50. It's not a coin
Right.
flip. It's a
Correct.
one in however many thousand gods there are.
Well, correct, and that's why you have to, for the sake of it being a coherent usage. And by the way, Pascal's wager is a psychological mental exercise. It's not something that's meant to be what I think a lot of
shit, in my opinion. But
well,
okay.
it's not something what I think people have tried to use, which is to turn it into a mathematical proof, for the viability of the existence of God. What it is to me, a personal epistemological challenge. Because here's the thing: if you just outright reject Pascal's wager the way you just did, to me, that's not showing a consideration for the viability of the claims at all. Because
I've considered it. I've just concluded that it's horseshit.
Well, yeah, but you've done that without taking it to. You've only done that with its very basic level, the 50-50 version.
It's
You
technically
haven't-
Rib's leading of the question. There's only 5 minutes left, so do remember that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, yeah. So you would be correct, Smokey, and like what you're kind of saying is that there are different interpretations. However, the most common one and the most commonly used one is the one of, you might as well believe that the Christian God exists. Because
But that's
if you
not what I'm
believe
using.
I understand that, but that's the kind of, but like so we may have been kind of slightly talking past each other, and that might be my fault. And the reason that we were talking past each other is that I am kind of disregarding the kind of more common use or the more standard use of Pascal's wager, because that is complete and utter horseshit. So there may be a different kind of version or a slightly altered version of it that you are presenting right now, and that I would have to evaluate. But I'm just kind of saying that the most common use of Pascal's wager is what I am rejecting.
Sure, that's fine, and that's why I didn't use it, because I don't necessarily disagree. I think it misses epistemologically and philosophically. It misses. You can't have a deductively strong or valid argument or sound argument unless you have all variables accounted for. So even if someone was to try and take Pascal's wager to its valid structure, good luck with that. But even if you were, you're basically going to have to account for every missing variable. You're going to have to account to give a value to every variable God claim. And so at that point, you're not even really using Pascal's wager anymore in a roundabout way. All you're doing is accepting theism and then finding out which one of the God claims is valid. My justification was the step before that, which is it more probable that the universe has a deity as an essentiality, or is it more probable that everything we see manifested through naturalistic methodology? And I would find it to be the more viable acceptance of the former rather than the latter. That is what carries forward into the Pascal's wager component that I was presenting, or bothered to kind of present or breach on the edge, which was the idea that now we have a board with theism, and now we're because this is the higher probability of acceptance of the nature of reality to what comports with reality. Now we compare the God claims, give them values, and see which one is viable. So like Islam as an example, Islam piggybacks off Christianity.
How much time do I have left, Mathwig? Sorry not to cut you off, Smokey.
I'll finish with this. I'm sorry.
To say that, man, your time has just ran out. Like, you have 30 seconds left.
I'll finish with this real quick.
I wanted to say something.
Oh, okay.
It's my
All right.
time. We should be able to use that. Okay. So, really, okay. So, sorry, really quick. I hear everything that you're saying, but to kind of go back to what you had said about, the option about whether it came from a god or whether it was naturalistic, until such time as we have a method of testing supernatural causes, therefore, like, literally everything that is not a natural cause, then it may very well be a possibility that it is supernatural. But until we have until we have a way of testing it, there is no justifiable reason for thinking that it is anything other than a naturalistic cause. That's my kind of main point. And I'm sure with that I've used my 30 seconds. Fucking hell, I almost ran out of breath.
If I may, and I'll just finish.
Go on ahead, Smokey. We're not very stringent here. I'm not going to beat you with the cane or anything if you get it wrong, or
Okay.
disobedient child or anything like that. There, so very flexible. Us Irish are flexible. Do your retort.
Well, it'll only take like 10 seconds.
Oh man, no, drag it out for a minute because I don't know. I haven't seen any questions. People put questions in the chat with 15 minutes to fill. Questions.
Cool. Well, I think I answered that particular thing that he ended with in terms of whether or not it's even viable or skeptical or cynical to require that type of standard of evidence of the divine. So I'll leave that where it is for the most part. But just to finish off my last point about the idea of like comparing on the graph, the Islam, Islam piggybacks off Christianity. Islam verifies Christianity. Christianity condemns Islam. Therefore, if Islam is true, then the Bible is true. And if the Bible is true, Islam is false. So this is one of those things where even one of the claims
Did you just
itself,
quote Sai Ten Bergate?
I don't. Lots of people say this. I've heard Jay Smith say it. Sam Shamoon say it. Lots of apologists say it. Well, it's true. It's true because even Muhammad.
Sorry, no, I was just a little bit personally offended that you just quoted Sai Ten Bergate at me.
Well, I'm not a Sai-Ten fan, so if I quoted him, I didn't intend to.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of the man. So that wasn't.
There's a point. There's a point.
So,
of agreement.
but anyway, that's one of those points that I would have in terms of if you were looking at it through personal psychology, personal epistemology, that's the type of thing you would be looking for. Like whether or not the claims validate or contradict, or I think that's what atheists do. I just don't know if it's always done the best way or the most keen way, or if it's done with, again, this naturalistic, testable, repeatable view. But with that, I'll yield. I'm done.
Okay.
And if Rib wants to respond, I concede to that. If Rib wants to respond to any of that, I concede to that.
No, man, I think I'm kind of good. I'm kind of happy to leave it over to the questions.
Cool.
Matt Big, I don't know if you saw my post there in the side chat, but I've had to pee for about, I don't know, 45 minutes maybe. So if you could just kind of do like one or two questions for Smokey, and I'll be right.
Cool. They're probably all for me, so we're probably okay.
Fucking hell, I'm unmuted now. Sorry about the audio issues tonight, people. Really, I'll hopefully sort this in the interim between this and the after.
What type of Mickey Mouse setup you got here, man?
Man, everything was fucking perfect in the living room, and then it takes up so much room in the living room that I spent the last 2 days cleaning out my spare room and making a studio, and did everything except change the fucking audio setup, so it's awful. It sounds great here for us, but...
Oh, by the way, Math Big probably goes without saying. You mind if I mirror the debate on my channel? I haven't been big on that lately, but do you mind? Is that cool?
If you give it a week. We'll talk about it after.
Okay, give it a week. Okay, no,
I
usually
do
that anyway. Okay,
right.
Sure.
Question for... scrolling up. Question from Critical Cripple for Smokey. Why do you think you have a soul to worry about? I will mute and pass to you.
Sure. I'd say there's pretty strong evidence to me with near-death experiences, particularly the ones that were, scientifically verified by multiple medical doctors, that there seems to be some level of consciousness that stretches beyond the physical. That's one more of the compelling ideas that I've seen. I'm not talking about the claims where people went up to heaven and met Jesus. I don't care about those. I'm skeptical about those too. I'm talking about the ones where people floated into the next room, saw things they couldn't possibly have seen while they were in a comatose state. Those I find very compelling as the idea that there could be some consciousness beyond the physical.
It's strange that you say that, Smokey, because that is actually one of the swaying arguments for my mother. She technically, her heart stopped twice during giving birth to my brother, and she could tell the doctors exactly what had happened during But that's again personal testimony. A lot of personal testimony.
And I think that the near-death experiences get a lot of bad news because the popular ones, the ones that get all the attention, are the I went and met Jesus, and many times those are full of crap anyway. So people buy into that garbage, and then they just tend to doubt the real ones because the real ones don't get advertised so much. So yeah, that's one of the things that really compels me.
I've seen a cloud that looks like my dog. I've never seen Jesus on toast, you know.
Neither have I.
Okay, moving on then. We'll move on to the next questions.
I may have seen Mary on toast, but I was quick to eat it, so yeah.
Real butter. Yeah, use Americans
There
don't
you
get
go.
real butter. Okay, moving on to the next question. Okay. Okay, apologies for the audio issues again, everybody. A fucking disaster. Oh, and I've lost everything. They keep typing everything. Every time they type, it moves. Oh, right, stop typing in the fucking private chat. Whoever's typing in the private chat. Every time you type, it puts me to the bottom. Okay, next question. I'm going to beat the two of them. Mindbreaker 101. Is it wrong for someone to take back what belongs to them? We'll offer that to Rib first, seeing he's back from the toilet, and then we'll give it to Smokey.
What was the question, sorry?
The question was, is it wrong for someone to take back what belongs to them?
I'm sure that there's probably like a wider context there.
I know, I fucking told people to put context in the questions and some of them didn't. Smokey, have you anything to add to that?
Like, no.
I mean, I guess in a very, very pure, like hypothetical sense, yes. Like, it'd be okay to, like, if it's your actual property and you're going through methods to acquire your property back, I don't think that, I mean, you shouldn't do it by any means necessary, I would say that, but yeah, I think you are within your rights to attempt to secure your property back, yeah.
Yeah, Santi says in the next sentence straight after that, ignore the previous question. So that's my fault for not reading ahead. Okay.
Failure.
Next one. Geo Sam, question for Smokey. Is it problematic that there are many interpretations by Christians / believers of what the Bible is supposed to be saying?
No, there's many different interpretations in every worldview and belief system. It's a byproduct of the human condition. We're all struggling to find the path of truth. No one in any, theistic claim that I can think of really claimed that the path of truth should be easy. Certainly not in the Christian God claim. It's not promised to be easy. In fact, the path is promised to be narrow. So again, it's being, I would say, coherent within the claim. Many people will be lost. This life is intended to be something specific where you're attaining the potentiality of the highest role in all of creation for all of eternity. So there's, bound to be a certain standard to be set for that type of position, as would be for any job position of such a thing like that.
Okay, unmuted now. Next question. Julie Levice. I think we've actually went through Pascal's wager, yeah? You've explained that, I think, to death. So, next
please.
one.
Yes. Geez.
Do you agree with discussing Flat Earth Creator God, what the fuck is that? Tetragrammaton or whatever, that non-virgins are to be stoned to death on their wedding night, taking that their father's front yard?
What is happening? What is going on here?
Question for Smokey, from Julie. Was it Julie? Sorry. SS 1964. Do you agree with your disgusting flat earth creator God, if you can see the private chat, man, I can't pronounce that word, that all non-virgins are to be stoned to death on their wedding night?
YHVH, yeah, okay, alright. Trying to be clever, okay.
No, yes.
Hold on.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, it's there.
Yeah, Tetragrammaton, that all non-virgins are to be stoned to death on their wedding / taking night in their father's front yard.
I don't know what any of that's about. I'll tell you what, come to an open mic sometime and try to be coherent. I'll be happy to answer your question. I don't know exactly what you're referring to.
I mean, I kind of...
Okay, moving on to the next one. Next question. Question for Smokey. Lots of questions for Smokey.
I bet.
Would you appeal to science or logic to explain your God? Are you not borrowing from a secular worldview? What is your thoughts on that?
There's no such thing as borrowing from a secular worldview any more than they would be borrowing from ours. It all has to do with where you believe the source of logic comes from. You either think it's something, for instance, axiomatic or circular, that it just is, or you believe it infers the existence of someone that established it. Each one is ultimately viable, and each one, can't be decided as arbitrarily better than the other one. You have to provide evidentiary support. Atheists don't have any evidentiary support for the non-existence of God. We have evidentiary support for the existence of God. It's two completely different models.
Nothing to add to that, Rib. We'll move on to the next one.
No,
It is for you. Question from Universal Artisan. Rib, if a masochist wanted to punch you in the face daily, would you let him?
If a masochist wanted to punch me in the face daily?
Yes.
Isn't it not if a masochist wanted me to punch him in the face daily? Am I reading the same question you are?
Sorry,
Well,
you are correct.
the sadist wants to inflict. The
No.
masochist.
Sorry, you are correct.
Is it? Maybe I have it backwards.
You can see the live chat as best as I can, alright?
Yeah.
Everything's failing here, okay? All the production is failing here.
If a masochist wanted me to punch him in the face daily, would I mean, probably not because I'm like a pacifist or anything like that, but it's just like I don't know. I kind of I don't like inflicting harm on people.
Why are you a masochistophobe? What's wrong with you, Rib? Come on.
Question from Gavin. Moving on then. Question from Gavin.
If I'm not, then
Because there is no empirical evidence that the universe and everything that is naturalistic is all there, why rubbish the transcendent?
One more time?
From Gavin, question for both. Because there is no empirical evidence that the universe and everything that is naturalistic is all there, there is, dash, why rubbish the transcendent?
Okay. So he's saying like why trash on God like unnecessarily, I guess is what he's saying. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not on that page with him. I get it. I mean, there's no reason to disqualify God, especially if your standard of evidence isn't something that can possibly verify God. So, and I think that's one of the things I said earlier in the debate.
And Rib, I think that was more aimed at you. But go on ahead.
I mean, okay, so because there's no empirical evidence that this universe and everything that is naturalistic is all that there is no evidence that it's naturalistic is all that there is. I mean, there kind of is, because we only have a method right now, and again, I'm open to there being like different methods in the future, or like us coming up with a way to test supernatural claims. But the point is that right now we don't have that method. So right now we can only test for naturalistic claims. There are things that we know the answers to, and there are things that we don't know the answers to. But that simply because we don't know the answers to them doesn't mean that we get to shove not even necessarily a god, but a supernatural claim in there. I mean, however long ago we didn't know what lightning was or what thunder or and like how it happened and why it was caused, and now we do. We have a naturalistic explanation for it. But the point is that you don't like, just because you don't know doesn't mean that you get to appeal to whatever fairy tale best appeals to you.
Elton, and a lot of repeating of questions here. We have a question. Critical Cripple, what is Smokey's favourite colour? Can you ask both interlocutors if the phosphine found on Venus led to the discovery of life, would it affect their religious views?
No, it wouldn't. That would be awesome.
Question for Smokey. Does he agree with...
Let me say this, though. Actually, to reply to the last one, what I would say is that would strengthen the case of the atheist who is saying that life could emerge in other places in different ways. The fact that we can't find that, I think, works against them. So if I would say this, that if we did find that life was able to, I don't know, as we would ascertain or think, spontaneously emerge somewhere else in different constructs in a completely different environment, that'd be a strong case for epistemological naturalism.
Thoughts on that, Rib?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, last question I see in the chat here is from 666-1964. Does Smokey agree with Yahweh that non-virgins that are found to be non-virgins on her raping night are to be stoned to death in her father's front yard?
Yeah, that's a very specific passage for a very specific people at a very specific time. And again, I'm not going to unpack that now.
No,
if you want to do that, come to a live show, bring the scripture reference, and we'll go through it. And we'll talk about why that was done.
Perfect. Right. Well, on that, before the whole fucking thing crashes and I have to set everything up again, boys, man, thank you very much for coming back. Thank you very much for doing this tonight. It has been very cordial. It has been lots of fun, and it went well.
It actually was.
Rib, I will, seeing as you started, we will let you go first. And is there
I
anything
made you
would
look
like to
like
say
a
or round
real
up?
dick for trying to use that fire background, huh?
I fucking used it once just to test it. You were talking. Smokey, is there anything you would like to add? Not so much as a closing statement, but anything.
No, I'm good. I thought it was a great exchange. I appreciate both you guys for putting it on. It was a good time. I love stuff like this because it does let me kind of get my, slightly differing perspectives on some of these things out. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys hosting it and letting me come here and pitch my case. Thank you so much.
Perfect. And Rib, do you want to blow smoke up my ass as well?
Just one final thing. It will take like 15 seconds or so. And just because Matic, look, I do have to admit, I do feel like a little bit bad. So you can get ready to start using your, fire graphics background thingy. If I could just take a moment, just to kind of be a little bit glib. I mean, technically speaking, Smokey can't prove that he exists, let alone a god. So,
Oh no, you're going to fall back on solipsism after I address solipsism?
I think he's just being a dick and going to show your face.
Reality?
I think he's just being a dick, Sheila.
You never turned your camera on.
There you go.
I don't exist.
Proof that the math pig exists.
Wait. So is it I have not provided extraordinary evidence that I'm not just some high-performance AI somewhere in a basement? Is that because I've heard that claim before?
Either that or a very accurate and very sophisticated soundboard.
That's fair. I'll give it to you.
In fairness, if we're all being dicks and picking on
my operator is a pro.
If we're all being dicks and picking on Smokey, that laugh is one of a kind. There is no computer-generated laugh that does that.
Amen to that.
Well,
awesome. I appreciate that, Rib. That's a good note to end on. I appreciate it. Good stuff.
It has been fun. We've had plenty of questions. I need to throw my computer out the window at the moment. And we'll be back in a certain amount of time. Dave will post the link to the after party. We'll all do our peas and runs. Get your tea, get your coffee, get more popcorn. We'll be back in 15-20 minutes or so, or maybe less. Rib, I promise sure will hang about for a while. Smokey has said that he'll hang about for at least a half an hour with us. So if anybody wants to jump in, there is the link in the certain chat, and other people, if you want in, send me a Twitter message. So, on that, I have to say a big thank you to everybody that watched, our 2 people that contributed, and of course the Patreons and everybody that contributes to the channel. It really, really does help an awful lot. So, before this thing crashes, I will say oink and out.